Awesome. Thank you so much for coming. So today we're just going to be doing kind of an introduction TK kindergarten presentation and parent workshop. We'll do some quick introductions because we have a pretty extensive team here with us with a lot of expertise in a lot of areas of expertise. So I'm Emily Flores. I am a school psychologist in the district.
I'm Amy Alarcon, a school psychologist intern here in the district as well.
I'm Jerica Babb. I'm a BCBA intern. I work for Talk Team, but we're contracted with Sanger Unified.
Yes, and my name is Angelina Duarte. I am the contracted BCBA for Sanger Unified, but I do work through the Talk Team as well.
I'm Edith Bolt, and I'm a school nurse and also the program coordinator of health services for Sanger Unified.
Good deal. Okay, so just kind of the agenda for today, we're going to very, very quickly go over just some developmental milestones, like what we would expect within those developmental milestones, as well as any red flags, kind of what to look out for if you do have concerns, and then just generally how to promote healthy development in those early years, kind of that 0 to 5 year range, what to do if you have concerns, and then potty training and immunization information. And we should have some time at the end as well if there are any questions. Okay. All right, so for those that are in person, we did have just this developmental milestone wheel. So it just kind of highlights the 4 different areas of development that we'll talk about. So it's going to be the gross and fine motor skills, social emotional development, communication, and cognitive. So with that paper, you can just kind of jot down notes if anything flags for you, any questions, and then just any personal notes as well that you might take away from the presentation. Okay, so just kind of starting us off with the basics, right? The foundation for any healthy development is going to be with healthy eating and a healthy diet. So just super quickly, just a resource that's there is choosemyplate.com, where you can kind of look at the different distribution and recommendations for that. Play, which we will talk about more extensively later on in the presentation, but general recommendation is for kids to get at least 3 hours of play during the day. And then, of course, also getting adequate sleep. That can make a huge difference in behavior development and just overall functioning, much like for us as adults. And so you can kind of see what the recommended areas are and amounts of sleep. So really, for our toddlers, I'm going to say our 1 to 3 year olds, it is, that 12 to 14 hours of sleep. Preschoolers should really be getting, that 11 to 13 hours of sleep. So really, that would be these 3 areas, really set up the foundation for healthy development for our students and kids. Mr. Acevedo, are both of them pointed there?
Yeah, so this one's up.
Yeah? Both of the cameras are on there? Okay. Just making sure. Okay, so just before we start getting into developmental milestones, I know when we start hearing about what is expected, it can really cause a lot of anxiety. So just kind of some words of caution, right? There is a broad variability in the rate that each individual kid might develop. So there is a broad range of what would be considered typical development for kiddos. For some children, those differences or slight delays might be just really temporary. And there really isn't any current distinction between kiddos who might have some early developmental delays and kind of those long-term outcomes. So, right, just because there might be a couple things that a kiddo is delayed in does not mean long-term that there will be significant delays for their entire life or lend itself or lead to, learning disabilities in the future. So we will be going over some red flags as well, but again, it's important to note that the delay does not mean that a child will develop a learning disability. So just wanted to kind of point that out as well, because again, it can cause anxiety. So just super quickly, again, I'm going to really quickly go through these slides, really just kind of noting what would be typical development, again, in those 4 areas that we talked about with different age groups. So starting with fine and gross motor skills by age 1, gross motor-wise, we would expect a kiddo to, by the age of 1, to sit without support, crawl, be able to pull themselves to standing, walk, while holding on to somebody, roll a ball and imitate an adult. Fine motor-wise, which is going to be kind of our small motor skills, right? So gross motor is going to be those full body movements. Fine motor is going to be really those smaller movements. So fine motor-wise, we would expect that a baby would be able to like reach and grab objects, right? This is the age that they're putting everything in their mouth. That is completely developmentally appropriate and normal. Being able to pick things up with a pincher grasp, so kind of between their thumb and their and one finger. Transfer objects back and forth between hands, as well as drop and pick up toys, right? So right around 1, kids love to like throw everything off of like their high chair, right? And watch us pick it up for them. Again, completely developmentally appropriate. Fine and gross motor skills between the ages of 1 and 2 year. So gross motor, again, those big motor movements, we would expect that during that 1 to 2 year frame, that a kiddo is able to walk alone, as well as walk backwards. They should be able to pick up toys from the floor, pull and push toys, sit themselves in a child-sized chair, walk up and down stairs while with support, right, whether holding a hand or holding onto something, move to music. Again, those fine motor skills or those small motor skills, we would expect that they can stack small blocks on top of each other, stack rings on a peg, kind of turn pages of books. Typically, it's going to be more like cardboard books, right? Scribble, turn knobs, start to be able to throw a small ball, and then paint kind of with a whole arm movement and motion. Okay, communication-wise, by year 1, we would expect kids to have 2 to 3 words besides mama and dada. So that might be, right, no, please, more. Some of those basic kind of commands typically are the ones that are going to develop first. Understanding very basic, simple instructions, recognizing words as symbols for objects, so kind of looking at books and having interest in that. Imitating familiar words, and then recognizing their name, right? So we would expect a child to respond to their name if it's called. And then during the 2 year mark as well, being able to understand simple directions, right? So go to the kitchen, grab the bottle, things like that. Their vocabulary starts to really explode from year to year. So we would expect them to have at least, approximately 200 words, as well as kind of extending the length of that sentence. So 2 to 3 word sentences as well. And then using words to express wants, right? So making those requests, we would expect that to really start to emerge. As well as understanding what and who questions. So who is that? What is that? And being able to respond in 1 to 2 words. Emerging grammar, and then emerging awareness of rhyme. Cognitive development, by year 1, we would expect babies to start following their moving objects with their eyes, so kind of that tracking piece. Recognizing differences among people. This is where, right, we start seeing like the stranger danger, right? That would be very developmentally appropriate as they're distinguishing between people that are familiar to them and not. Responding to and imitating like facial expressions, responding to very simple directions, imitating gestures and actions, and then putting small objects inside and outside of a container with intention. Just kind of that exploring phase, right? Between 1 to 2 years, again, a lot like more imitation. They might be like copying a lot of what you're doing. Being able to match like 2 similar objects, and recognizing the difference between you and me. So, right, they're not seeing themselves as an extension of their parent at that point or guardian. Caretaker accomplishes primary learning through their own exploration, right? So they're really exploring everything around them as a learning opportunity. So every new thing that they encounter, they're checking it out. Understanding and following simple, familiar directions. Again, give me that, go get that, some of those basic things. And then looking at storybook pictures with an adult, being able to name and kind of engage with the story, right? Naming out and pointing out familiar things, requesting, asking questions while reading a story. Finally, the last area that we are going to kind of look at is that social emotional development, which is also an incredibly crucial learning piece for development. It is part of the foundation and is predictive of like children's adaptation to like learning environments as well as to future academic success, right? And the reason for that is because, it really helps build kiddos like self-awareness, right? Their collaboration with others, being able to interact appropriately with others, being able to regulate their own emotions and their own responses to different stimuli and things that are going on in their environment. you know, building that empathy and caring, right? And being able to recognize emotions in others and respond appropriately. You know, being able to take initiative to learning, as well as those attachments to, you know, peers, caregivers, and that kind of morphs obviously as they age. So with social emotional development, right, by 6 months, we typically expect them to be smiling and engaging in some of that back and forth smile, showing preferences for parents or primary caregivers, again, typically by that 1 year mark, imitating and copying those facial expressions, and that's why it's really important to spend a lot of time, right, looking at our children and, you know, letting them see a lot of that emotion. Again, at some point, they develop kind of that stranger danger, which is totally appropriate and developmentally appropriate, and then, you know, copying simple actions of others. Between that 1 to 2 year mark, begin playing beside their peers. So that would be like kind of parallel play, right? They might imitate or copy or, you know, go play kitchen next to another kiddo, but they're not necessarily understanding sharing. So they're not gonna have necessarily a fully engaged play session at that point. But they'll recognize themselves in the mirror or a picture, so they can identify themselves. Again, pretend play, referring to themselves by name, playing by themselves, right, and being able to initiate on their own, right? So again, that exploring of the world and playing and interacting in the world with the world around them, and then being able to help like clean up, right, and put things away, and kind of developing that understanding. Going back then, so now we're kind of moving into the 2 to 3 year range, and looking at those 4 areas of development as well. So for their, again, gross motor or those big muscles, we would expect them to be able to run forward very well, being able to jump in place with 2 feet together, standing on 1 foot, they might need to hold on to something, walking on tiptoe, and then being able to like, kick a ball forward. With fine motor, we would expect that they can start to string large beads, they can turn single pages, start cutting with scissors, holding a crayon kind of with a thumb and finger, so right, having a little bit more of a typical and appropriate grip. Using one hand consistently, so they have some kind of hand dominance by that point, that's emerged. And then being able to imitate like circles, you know, vertical lines, so up and down, as well as side to side, horizontal. And then for communication, again, that language just continues to explode. So we go from kind of like the 200 words all the way to about 1,000 words by the time that they're 3. And so we would expect also about 3 to 4 word sentences, and starting to kind of form more complex sentences. We might see like overgeneralization of past tense, so they swimmed, right? They're starting to kind of apply grammar rules to more things, and kind of, even if it's not fully correct, they'll start using more appropriate pronouns, so I, you, and me. They know like larger body parts, so starting to name body parts, right, and identify them. Can do like repeat nursery rhymes, tell their age, and would know their full name. Cognitively, development during this time, we would expect that they can respond to simple directions, being able to, again, when we're looking at books, kind of start naming objects, identify things within the picture, just, you know, increasing the engagement with that. And then I'm going to kind of just point out a few of them as we kind of move through these. But again, still being able to recognize themselves, being able to like imitate more complex like adult actions, and whatnot. For social emotional development, for that 2 to 3 year range, being able again to continue to build on playing near other children. They might watch and kind of be more observant of other kids play around them, maybe join in briefly. They get pretty possessive of their things, right? This is the that's mine, my phase, whether or not it is theirs. Begin to play house, really symbolically using objects, and then, you know, participating in like simple group activities. They might be able to identify their gender, but we would expect, again, that also they have like limited attention span, right? So maybe 2 to 3 minutes is not unusual for this age range. And again, they're still learning through exploring the world around them. Okay, so now moving into kind of that 3 to 4 year range. Again, going back to the motor skills. So gross motor skill wise, again, we would expect them to be able to run around obstacles, right? So kind of navigating around things, walking on a line, balancing on one foot for a short amount of time, being able to start hopping, pushing, being able to like steer wheeled toys, start to develop riding a tricycle, right? That circular foot motion, be able to go down a slide independently, and kind of throwing a ball overhead and catching a larger sized ball. Fine motor, we would expect that they can stack like 9 blocks on top of each other, driving a nail and peg, copy a circle, as well as imitate like a cross, right? So those motor movements and drawings are becoming more complex. Manipulate clay, so they might start, building things with clay, and then, writing using scribbles. So again, just getting more complex with those motor movements. Communication-wise, we would expect that they can understand and use language to communicate effectively. So again, like just the functional use of language, right, is developing into more complex language. Has a vocabulary of nearly 1,000 words. We're seeing just more complex sentences, both in length as well as vocabulary. With that sentence like being 4 to 5 words, then being able to tell a story, start to name colors, start to understand some references to time with that story time. So they might understand like lunchtime, tonight, yesterday, and then begin to obey requests, such as like put the block in the basket. And then cognitively, for that 3 to 4 year range, we would expect kiddos to recognize and match 6 colors, being able to intentionally stack blocks or rings, in the order that they should go on the peg. Draw something recognizable for what that is meaningful to the child. So they might draw a house and be able to tell you that that's a house. Asking questions for information, so the why and how phase, a lot of information seeking, right? Trying to understand the world around them, and just continued understanding of concepts, increased awareness of past and present, beginning to recognize like print conventions, and understand, right, that like the actual words on the book mean something, and lend themselves to being able to read, and then being able to begin to recognize alphabet letters. And then for social emotional development, we would expect them to more easily be able to engage with peers their age with shared activities, as well as being able to do turn taking with assistance, sharing toys, begin kind of dramatic play. So they might start like really playing house, right, with others, and taking on a specific character in that role play. Participate in group activities, and really starting to understand kind of those group rules, and then demonstrate concern for others and people in distress. So if someone's crying, they might go up and ask what's wrong, and kind of seek out that interaction. Seek support from primary teachers and caregivers, but again, we would still expect there to be a pretty short attention span. Okay, and then for the 4 to 5 year range, this will be the last kind of developmental range that we'll be talking about. For going back to the motor skills, for gross motor, again, so we would expect them now to be able to walk backwards, kind of heel to toe, being able to jump forward 10 times without falling, walking up and down stairs independently, alternating feet. And then being able to do somersaults. So again, just kind of more complex motions and movements. And then with fine motor, being able to cut on a line continuously, copying squares and crosses, adjusting grasp and body position for increased control. So again, just like in that picture, right, being able to like hold the paper down, adjust it, and kind of draw on there with better control. And then starting to draw, write out letters or letter-like shapes. For communication, it would be typical for a child to start using language to communicate with both familiar and unfamiliar adults, right? So it would no longer be that only their parent can understand what they're saying. They're able to more functionally kind of communicate also with unfamiliar adults to them. Continuing just to increase with the complexity of their sentences, both vocabulary as well as length of sentence, as well as just the concepts that they're able to communicate, right, as their vocabulary expands. Being able to use past tense correctly, being able to identify, again, a broader range of colors, as well as shapes, and then understanding more as far as those time references, right? In the morning, tomorrow, noontime, next. They can start to speak in conditions such as I hope, and then again, still just exploring through question asking with, why, who, and such. Okay, and then for cognitive development, for the 4 to 5 year range, we would expect them to be able to play with words. So again, as that vocabulary and just those concepts become more complex, their ability to kind of manipulate that and communicate that. Pointing and naming colors, matching pictures with familiar objects, and so it'd be being able to match a dog with a dog. And then being able to draw, name, and describe recognizable pictures. Starting to rote count, so just count off the top of their head, or imitating an adult. They might know their street and kind of understand that relationship of knowing that they live in a specific town. Again, more just increased understanding of function, time, in those concepts, and then understanding that print is something that is read and has specific meaning, and then extends recognition of letters of alphabet. So they're just continuing, right, to take in and absorb and learn those skills. Okay, and then finally for social emotional development, again, it just becomes more complex, right? They should be able to play and intermingle with other students, and pulling in other students and kind of intentionally directing that play. The dramatic play is closer to reality, right? Where they are really getting into detail about what they want the others in that play to do. Being able to respond again to another's distress and needs. And more likely, instead of just saying what's wrong or you're hurt, they might actually try and solve it, right? Let me go get you a Band-Aid, or let me help you out. Participate positively in group settings, right? So that's going to be a classroom setting, being able to do carpet time and participate in those types of activities. And then their attention span will continue to expand. But they are still learning just through that exploration, through discovery on their own, and it would still be expected that they're pretty easily distracted. They typically say for those early years that you would expect them to be able to attend for about however many years old they are. So 4 to 5 year old, right? 4 to 5 minutes or so would be typical. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Alarcon.
Thank you. Hopefully that works. Alrighty, so now that Ms. Flores is able to describe some of the milestones where your children should be at, when they're ready for TK or kinder, we're gonna go over some of those red flags, so some of those warning signs that we should be aware of in regards to all of the different areas that Ms. Flores was just mentioning. Some terms of motor development, this is where we look at those difficulties with those gross or fine motor coordination skills. So their ability to use their large muscles and even their smaller muscles. For example, hopping, they have difficulty hopping on both legs or one leg. Cutting using the practice scissors, if you're seeing they're not cutting in straight lines, even when it's with the big thick borders. Or even as simple as stringing beads or picking things up with that pincer grasp that we were mentioning earlier. In addition, there's difficulties with activities of daily living. So for example, how can they dress themselves? Even if it's clothes that you already gave them, putting it on themselves, putting on their socks, is it on the right way, is it backwards? Difficulties with toileting, are they able to go on their own or not? And difficulty coloring, copying, or drawing. So even still, are they with, even kinder and preschool, still difficult for kids to draw within the lines, but is it more exaggerated that you think could be a warning sign? These things to look out for. In terms of communication, this is where we look at children that are still not able to meet their speech and language milestones. And this is where we look at limited receptive vocabulary. So this is a child's, them struggling to identify, for example, if you give them a list of a dog, a house, and a car, they only know one of those objects that you named. So it's the language that they understand. There's also reduced expressive vocabulary. So do they have limited vocabulary? Are the words, based on their age, is it much far less than what they're supposed to be at? Do they have difficulty understanding simple directions? So even just saying, sit down, go there, those simple directions, are they struggling with that? Do they have monotone or other unusual features of their speech? So is it very flat? Do they not, if it's something exciting that's happening around them, is their voice, their pitch, and their features of speech, is it not matching what the situation is? Reduced intelligibility, so are you able to understand what they're saying based on how old they are? And this is both yourself and with strangers. Immature syntax, this is, for example, for a child to say, the dog is running fast. Instead of saying that, they would say, dog run fast. So those grammar rules, are they missing those specific words that would make up a sentence? And then difficulty rhyming words. So when you practice those nursery rhymes at home, those little child songs that would rhyme, are they difficulty rhyming? Also, do they have limited interest in playing with others? We talked about earlier, they can play alongside with each other, but do they not show interest in joining the game, joining the activity? Or lack of spontaneous communication, so are they not, saying what they're thinking, trying to create that conversation? And also, they have limited ability to initiate that conversation that they would with you, with a sibling or someone else they may know or may not know. In terms of cognitive development, this is where we see delays in cognitive and reading skills. So for example, they do not demonstrate object permanence. So this is, for example, you show them an item and then they can see it, you cover it, and they still don't understand that there's still an item underneath whatever you used to cover it. There's a limited understanding of means-ends relationships. So for example, them still struggling to understand that they can, like if they want a cookie from the cookie jar, they can get a stool to get, to access that cookie. So there's still some struggle in that and knowing they can get something to still get the outcome. They're lacking symbolic play behavior. So for example, if you give them a toy block and other children might use it to play telephone and play pretend, we're still seeing that some children are not, they're not using objects for that symbolic play. There's limited phonological awareness, like I mentioned before, the rhyming, that's difficult for them. Blending syllables together to form words is an area of struggle. They're not as quick to name different colors or different letters and numbers. They have minimal interest in print. So for example, if you're reading a book together, like those cardboard books, or if you transition to more like that finer paper, and they're just flipping through and not noticing, oh, there's words here that we can read to know the story, they're just flipping through. That could be an area too to look for. And also they have trouble learning their numbers, their alphabet, or days of the week. So that's also something to look for. When looking at social emotional development, this is where we see children not showing an interest in others, even if it's someone familiar to them. So this includes like other children, other siblings, adults. They're not imitating others. So for example, they're not imitating, when you're engaging in play, they're not imitating something that you're doing or something they see others do. They have difficulty responding to others' emotions. So if they see another child cry, are they acting on it? If they see that you're mad, are they reacting to that? Or see you're happy, are they joining in? They have constant tantrums. Again, they're young, they're little. It's something expected for a tantrum to happen, but is it more frequent than not? That we're seeing, they're having big reactions to something that we would consider a small problem for a child that age. Like Mrs. Flores mentioned, the child's attention span is similar to their age, but we would see, for example, is inattention or them being distracted an area of concern if if a child that's 5 years old is only able to attend for a minute or even less than, that could be an area that you would like to catch early on, including being impulsive and hyperactive. Is it much more difficult for them to, sit still, come back, and is it throughout the day? It's not just one specific time of the day. Do you see that from the moment they wake up to the moment they go to sleep? And also, do they have difficulty changing activities, handling disruptions to routine? So if you, for example, you say we're going to go to the store, then grandma's house, and then there's something happens and you can't go to grandma's house and they know, are they having those big reactions to those changes in routines? And lastly, are they perseverating? So are they constantly repeating an idea? For example, saying like, I want the red shoe. You're like, that's okay, we can get the blue, yellow shoe. No, but I want the red shoe. And it's constantly repeating the same idea over and over and over. Now I'll go into talking a little bit about play, since that was another core area of development for our children and the importance of it. So many different scholars, researchers note that play is vital for a child's development. As we can see, many people say it's the work of a child, it's the highest form of research, and it gives the children a chance to practice what they are learning. And it's true, for children, for play, it was recognized as a human right by the United Nations High Commission for Human Rights. And this is where it's important for children. This is where children learn how to, work with others. This is where they learn how to resolve conflicts. They get to practice their different skills, and they can regulate their own emotions, with that conflict resolution. They can also with play, it doesn't have to be with huge, like the best new toys that you can find at Walmart or Target nowadays. It can be very basic of how they play with sand, how they play with Play-Doh or different blocks. It doesn't have to be extravagant. We can go back to the basics to engage with that play with our kids. And also, most importantly, I would say too, it's where we give children the chance to be creative, to explore their imagination, and like Mrs. Flores was saying, explore the world around them. And to move forward, we could also look at how we can promote a healthy development for our children going through the different years. So up to 1 year of 1 year old that the child is, it's important that we read to our children every day, because this is where, especially where we can look at, more those picture books, those cardboard books, where children are, he likes the idea, where our children can just interact with us and interact and hear the different vocabulary that we're using, the way that we even read the story, and how, the different ways that we can make it interactive for them. We can play with them with different toys that roll, where they can dump things out from a container. We can help them stack it together so they can know the cause and effect toy. So if I push these blocks, they're gonna fall. That's the way that they can learn that. We can listen to and make music with our children. So this can be even songs that use gestures with our hands, like using those fine gross motor skills, like Itsy Bitsy Spider, is one of the songs they learn where they use their bodies. We can play interactive games like peekaboo or my turn, your turn, showing them those skills. And also, children at this stage are trying to do more on their own. So it's okay to give them some independence to, learn those skills on their own. They can struggle a bit for some of those tasks, but it's important to also give and take. Give them a little bit of that independence to learn those self-help skills. When they're in between the ages of 1 and 2, it's still important, keep reading to them. And I would also say, explore the different interests. Like when they're 1 to 2, you can put in different books, like with farm animals, with different, like princesses or whatever, will catch their interest. You can praise them for good behavior and accomplishments with specific praise. For example, if they cleaned up their toys on their own, it's like, thank you, you cleaned up your toys on your own, building it with very specific praise. You can now integrate giving your child options, letting them choose, making them think they have some control when it's that that different form of psychology where like, we're having these two options, but let's make you think you get one. And making sure that those options are okay with you. Ask them questions, promote some of that conversation and that back and forth interaction. To also like promote, their vocabulary, their communication skills. You could encourage them to repeat words back to you and to use their own words. You can start describing daily activities. If you're going out to the store, you can start saying like, okay, we're gonna pick up X, Y, and Z, making it more of like a report, like a news report with your child, and have them tell you what they're doing. It's like, oh, I'm playing this, have them start interacting. You can scribble, sort shapes with each other, sort blocks with one another, pointing out the different colors, the different sizes. And at this time, try to provide your child with social interactions with other children around the same age. So this is going to the park, setting up play dates with someone going to the library too, with some of the free community events that you may see, just so that they can start interacting with other children. Between the 2 to 3 years, this is where, again, keep reading. That's a common theme throughout the rest of these. It's keep reading to your children. Start visiting the library. You can start speaking to your child slowly and clearly, like establishing like how to pronounce certain sounds, how to articulate. And it should be expected around this time. It's very typical for children around this age to have some of sound errors, like their R's, their TH sounds. It is common, but that's why we want to keep practicing with them, right? It is normal for children around this age to fear loud noises, the dark, certain animals. But it is important to remind them that they are safe, they are with you, they are okay. And it's also important to find regular and structured opportunities for interactions with different kids and different peers their age. So again, like establishing those play dates, going to the park often. You could also supervise as your child eats, or they bathe, or they dress themselves, again, giving them that chance to do some of those things more on their own. And also encouraging them to play with toys and be more creative and engage in fantasy. That's appropriate for their age. And then between the ages of 3 and 4, again, important for them to read, but now encourage them to take the lead in choosing what they would like to look at, what they like to read about, and have them practice how to read as well. Encourage your child to explore and learn things on their own. So again, it's taking one little step back, still supervising them, but allow them to interact with what's ever around them within reason. Again, encourage them to share their experiences with you daily. So it's sharing different activities they've played in, the things they are drawing, and then showing interest in what they're sharing with you. Praise them for being independent and encourage them to dress themselves when they eat, when they choose their own clothes, even when it doesn't match. But praising them for the times where they're able to successfully do things on their own, or when you see that they're trying to, or when they're helping you to. And then this is an important one as well, and it's a very difficult one too, but try to limit your child's TV time and their screen time when they're playing video games, or when they're on your phone, on their tablets, just so that they have the opportunity to learn through play and with that human experience too. Between the ages of 4 and 5, at this time for reading, let your child tell you the story, pointing out to different letters or pictures, and then visiting the library and have them gain that independence of choosing what they want to read. Again, with that specific praise them for the good choices that they make, promoting that value of empathy and like that perspective taking, and then helping your child understand how their behaviors impact others. So some of those, like if you act this way, behave this way, this is why X, Y, and Z happened, or this is why they felt this way. Give your child simple household chores. So for example, it could be easy as, you see this trash here on the table, let's put it in the trash, pick up your shoes, pick up brother or sister's shoes, just so that they can start, getting in some form of routine. Children at this age also ask many questions, but it is important to keep your answers short and direct with your kids, and tell them the truth, but also be prepared for like those difficult questions, like where do babies come from? Things that are fair and just, and also spirituality and other topics that might be difficult to talk about. But again, it's being direct is important here. Now, going back a little to the screen time and technology use, I think this is a very important one for our kids, especially between the ages of 0 and 2. It's important for them to choose real people over screens, and to limit that, that screen time for them. And again, it's a difficult one. Everyone is busy. Different routines and different expectations for different households are, it's completely different for everyone. But in terms of our kids, it's important to find different alternatives for them, so that they have that human interaction at least. So maybe if you do give them, the tablet or your phone, or put on the TV, watch and play together what they're doing, right? It's point out what they're seeing, and talk about it. And also gives you all the opportunity to see what they're seeing, right? And being able to monitor that as well. Again, it's important to also choose short and simple TV shows or videos or different games that they might play. There's a lot out there that shows like very flashy and very fast, different stimulation. So it's important to find something that's very simple, that's not going to, dysregulate them in the moment or even afterwards. And also think about your own habits. It's difficult. You have to do different chores around the house. You have to make dinner. You have to take care of your other children. So try thinking about setting up different activities for them that are different alternative to going and using screens. Between the ages of 3 and 8, try to balance that screen time with different activities. So again, limit how much time they spend watching different videos, playing games, and balance that out with, for example, okay, we're gonna watch a 30-minute show, let's just say, and we're gonna spend an hour outside. We're gonna play together, we're gonna do some sports, we're gonna go for a family walk, and try to balance that out. Again, choose shows or different media that match your child's interests and age. So again, this being very appropriate for where your child is. And again, monitor what they're looking at, because out there, something can say it's educational and actually really isn't. So that's why it's important to look at, and sit through and monitor and see what your child is viewing. And make screen time social. So this could also be if you use FaceTime, Skype, Zoom, or WhatsApp, that you can even call a family member, someone that the child knows, and have them talk with each other face to face. Have the other person read with them. Have different activity setups, so that they have something that they can do with someone else. And also, again, think about how your own habits, again, children, you're your first children's teacher. They are able to observe what you're doing, and they will imitate that, they will copy that. So it's important to think of what we are doing with our own technology. And so now, with everything we said, and we know it's a lot, but if you do recognize some of these red signs or these warning signs with your children's, with the different areas of development, this is what we can do if you do have some concerns. So what's important is early identification, especially if you're noticing those gaps. It's important to intervene early so that we can start bridging that close instead of letting that gap continue to grow. So what's important here, like I said, it's intervene early versus wait and see, and seeing that gap continue to get bigger and bigger. So first off, start with your pediatrician. In the beginning, you should be taking your children to get their wellness child checkups. That first week visit being when they're 3 to 5 years old, and then going up from like 1 month, 2 months, 4 months, and so on. And letting your pediatrician know, your concerns. What are you seeing? So that they can help guide you in the right direction and provide the best medical advice for you and your family. In addition, you can also talk to your school, especially if you have preschool or school-age children. You can talk to your school team to get a screener for your child. You can also talk or ask for an SST. And an SST is a student study team meeting. And this is where all the important people that are going to help you and help your child become successful meet together and talk about areas of concern, strengths, challenges, the different interventions you're already doing across the home and school site. And it just lets everyone be on the same page to what your child needs. And then if your child is identified as having needs for any of these areas, make an effort to get them those early intervention services, so this being with your school site or with other outside providers. And again, it does not mean your child will always need this level of support. Like I said, we're trying to bridge that gap early on. And so if we're able to do that early, we're able to help them grow and help them develop those skills so that then we can fade off those interventions, especially if they're showing signs of success. And it can be temporary, it can be a little bit more, but in all, it is for the best interest of your children. And then these are some resources of different people, different organizations, districts that you can go to for more information. So we have our Central Valley Regional Center. There is a wait list for the Central Valley Regional Center. That's why it's important to reach out to them early, especially if you have concerns, so that you're able to get on the wait list and have someone reach out to you sooner rather than later. We also have Exceptional Parents Unlimited. They help provide a lot of support for families, especially if students have identified needs or have suspected to have needs. We have Valley Children's, of course, for that medical expertise. And then we also have our Sanger Unified Family Resource Center, where they do offer weekly parenting classes and resources, both in English and Spanish. And we also have our migrant program housed there too. And now I'll hand it off to our talk team.
Thank you. Okay, hopefully that works. Hello again. So my name is Angelina Duarte, and I am the BCBA consult for Sanger Unified. So we're going to be going through essentially kind of the pottying steps and some ways of being able to see whether or not your child is ready for potty training and essentially ready to go ahead and join their TK or kinder team. So welcome. So what we're going to be going through is we're going to go through all of the readiness signs. So what we're looking for so that your child is telling you, my body is ready to go ahead and toilet train. An overview of basic training ideas and things that you can try at home, as well as the importance of more of an individualized approach. So we might give you guys some suggestions, but because everybody is a little bit different, you might need to tailor it to your little friend, which is perfectly fine. We want to make that experience special for them, so we'll be giving you some ideas for that. So some things to consider, of course, we've been going over the developmental milestones, and as we've kind of mentioned already, sometimes for our friends, the ages for these developmental ages will kind of vary a little bit depending on how your friend is developing. So typically around that 2-year age is usually when your child starts to show that awareness of fullness or being uncomfortable because they need to void. And then on average, usually it's around 3 to 4 years of age is typically when you start seeing more actual toilet training skills where they're indicating that they need to go to the restroom or showing you those signs, and they're kind of able to go almost on their own, somewhat with assistance, and then you're also starting to see more of that secure, no longer bedwetting around 4 years old. So they're able to stay dry throughout the entire night. However, we do need to consider when we're doing toilet training that there may be some medical issues or other diagnoses that might make this happen a little bit slower for your friend. And then of course, children with disabilities or known needs also typically will take just a little bit longer to go ahead and get these skills, whether it's a lack of communication or even a lack of understanding what that pressure and what that feeling actually means that they need to go potty. So we're gonna go through what skills your child needs to be successful at school. So when we're talking about being independent, we want to make sure that we're starting to see those signs of appropriate communication, whether it's vocal or non-vocal signs that they need to use the restroom. So vocally, you know, most kids might be able to say potty or something like that, whereas other friends, if they're more non-vocal, you might see some pointing or things like that, or maybe they point to their stomach or their tummy to indicate that they need to go. Another thing is our friends are still super itty bitty in TK and Kinder, so some reminders of, hey, do you need to go to the bathroom? You know, every hour to 2 hours is perfectly fine, as well as normal for that age as well. As far as independence, we also want to start to see some of those gross and fine motor skills that we talked about previously. We want to start seeing that they're at least able to kind of pull up their pants, or they're even able to kind of pull them down to start that process to go to the bathroom. However, they might still need some help with some buttons and zippers. That's perfectly fine. Sometimes those are really hard. Another thing that we're looking for independence for TK and Kinder, and this is more of a safety as well, is we do want to make sure that they're able to wipe and clean themselves independently. That's not something that typically the school would assist you guys with. Just for safety, we want to make sure that they're independent, but there is a possibility for assistance from the nurse if that's needed. You just need to make sure to let your school know. Another thing we want to see is them at least attempting to go ahead and do those cleanup skills, so washing and drying their hands. But some assistance, like I said, is okay. For example, they might need help navigating to the restroom. However, most TK classes, as it indicates, do have that restroom inside of the classroom, so it's really easy for them to go ahead and go. As well as they may need help turning on and off the sink. That's perfectly fine, and staff are able to do that, as well as, of course, using that paper towel dispenser, since some of them are pretty tall. And we already kind of discussed this. If they need assistance with the buckling, the zipping, that is perfectly fine as well. We want to make sure that overall, majority, they're independent with those skills, but again, some help is okay too. So some of the readiness signs that we have to indicate that your friend is ready to start that process of toilet training is they might start to show signs such as maybe they've already gotten wet in their diaper and now they're starting to kind of pull their diaper off themselves, right? Or they're walking around the house without their pants on suddenly. That's usually an indicator that, like, hey, I wet my diaper and it's not comfortable anymore, I need to be changed. So it says it right there on the third one as well, they're taking off their diaper and things like that. You're also noticing that maybe they're staying dry a little bit longer. You're having to change that pull-up or that diaper a little less. That time frame that we're actually looking for readiness is about 2 hours. So if your friend is able to stay dry at least 2 hours or longer, that's usually a sign that their bowel muscles are a little bit stronger and developed so that they can go ahead and start doing that toilet training. Another social sign is the hiding to urinate or to go poop. So that is a very common age range, around 3 to 4 will they hide somewhere to go ahead and do their business. That's indicating to you that they know that it's a privacy activity and they might be ready to go to the bathroom. Another one is showing interest in you when you go to the bathroom. So if you're taking your private time in the restroom and they want to be with you, or they want to sit on the toilet, they want to see what you're doing with the toilet paper, that's another indicator that that is a great way of modeling that process and starting to introduce that to your friend. Another one is they're able, of course, to follow simple instructions. So 1 to 2 step instructions. So come here, sit down, pull down, grab this, and things like that. Another sign is that when they are wet, they are uncomfortable. So those are our friends where as soon as they're wet, you know, because they're crying, that is a good sign that they don't enjoy that, and that might be a sign that they are ready to toilet train with you. Another one is, of course, willingness to enter the restroom, so they're not scared of the toilet. And then also they start showing you signs of actually helping you with that diaper change. So if they're grabbing the wipes from you, if they're grabbing the new diaper for you and handing it to you and starting to help you with that process, that's a good indicator that your friend might be ready to go ahead and toilet train. So preparing for success, there are a couple things that you can do so that it makes it just a little bit easier to start that process with our friends. So one of the big ones is making sure that you are consistent and set up some kind of a schedule or a routine with your learner. So one thing that we always like to do is use lots of visuals or pictures or even social stories. So social stories are just a little story that you can make up with your friend where you make a little book and it's a little story that you can read. There are a lot of really great ones that you can find for free on Google or online about toileting, reading those toileting books to your friends to help introduce that process to them. Another one is we definitely want to go ahead and really encourage that communication with your friend as well. So even before you're noticing those signs of them possibly being ready to toilet train, we want to start introducing that language. So when you're changing them, oh, you're wet, you had to go potty, okay, like let's change. So you're starting to use that language to identify that for them so that it makes it a little bit easier for them to then start using that language with you. Another thing that you want to consider is any medical limitations. During toilet training, sometimes you might start noticing maybe they're having a harder time. They're not going to the bathroom all the way. Maybe they're withholding or something like that. So this is another indicator where it might be a good idea to reach out to your pediatrician if you're noticing anything like that or any difficulty. Or straining is another one that you want to look for too. So here's an example of kind of how to set up the routine. So this is a really kind of basic, simple example of how to figure out when your learner is going to the bathroom. So when you're pretty sure that your child is ready to potty train, you want to start essentially logging when they're wet. So for example, in this one, this parent just happens to be checking their child about every 2 hours to see whether they're wet or dry. And you would just kind of indicate however you wanted to, wet or dry, for each hour so that you could start getting a pattern of when your child's body clock is actually going to the bathroom. And then that way you kind of have almost like a time frame or a schedule of when it would be appropriate to prompt them to ask for the restroom and then to go sit and try. If your learner is always dry at 10:30, 10:30 is probably not a good time to take them, right? Their body clock is not telling you that they need to go or that they typically go during that time. But if your learner is always wet around the 12:30 time, maybe 12 o'clock in the afternoon is that good time right before that indicator to go take them to the restroom to go try. So doing this is a good way to kind of start that process so you start learning when your child typically goes to the restroom so you can catch it before that happens. And then we're going to go ahead and, do you want me to continue?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
I think the next point.
Okay, so here's another example of a consistent schedule. So you can see over here to the right, they put in an actual to-do schedule for their friends. So usually using like a little visual strip so that your child knows each and every step of what they need to do. Another thing that you can do is use this as a checklist for your learner, where each step that you finish, you can go ahead and cross it off with like a dry erase marker to help them keep track of all the different things that they need to do, since there are multiple steps for toilet training. So like I mentioned about trying to figure out when your friend's body clock is, think about that time of day. So when is your child typically wet? And again, we gave the example of essentially kind of checking them every hour to 2 hours to set up that routine and that schedule. Make sure when you're starting the toilet training that you get everybody involved. You know, if you have grandparents that see the children for a little while, make sure that they know what your schedule is. If you're taking your child every 2 hours to the bathroom, we want to make sure that everyone is doing the same thing so that your child can learn to toilet sooner. If we have a break in that routine or that schedule, depending on your friend, we might have to restart. Only because we want to make sure that they really get used to understanding what that pressure means and that means I need to go to the bathroom. Another thing is, again, write it all down so that you can keep track of when your learner is going to the bathroom. You know, if their toileting schedule has changed because you're pushing more water in order to do the toilet training, you might have to adjust your times a little bit. Your learner might be going to the bathroom more often after you start doing toilet training. So keeping kind of a log is a good way of keeping track of that in case you have to adjust your times a little bit. Another idea is the toileting routine of 5 minutes on, 10 minutes off. So this is more of what's called a potty party routine. And that's where you spend 1 day with your learner just focusing on toilet training. And so what this is typically we like to fill our learners with juice and salty foods. And this is because it typically makes them go to the bathroom a lot sooner when we push those things. So apple juice is a great one. And then some saltines is always great, or goldfish is typically a pick. And what we do is we give them the juice, and after about 30 minutes, we prompt them to go sit on the toilet for only 5 minutes. If they don't go, that is okay. We get to come off the toilet, we have a party for 10 minutes, we're all fun, and then we just go back on the toilet for another 5 minutes. And this repeats throughout the day. And this is typically happening when you have a friend where you can't set a schedule. No matter how often you check your friend, they're going to the bathroom at consistently different times of the day, and you can't catch them for that more natural toilet training. This is more of a strategic way so you can spend the entire day trying to catch that natural occurrence of going to the bathroom, which is why it's always that rotation of 5 minutes sitting on the toilet, trying, and then 10 minutes off and play. And then we just repeat throughout the entire day until you have about 2 or 3 successes and we can have a potty party. And then, of course, during this one, I already mentioned it, we do want to make sure that you're increasing the liquid intake. That way, you are increasing the amount of times that your friend might have a success in the toilet. Here is another example of just some visuals that sometimes we use for toilet training. So showing that we need to do pants down, we're sitting on the toilet, and then there's a visual for staying on the toilet, since some friends like to sit and then get off. That way we're prompting them to at least count to 10 seconds before they can get off, and then kind of continuing that process. And then I'm going to go ahead and move on to Miss Jerica, who's going to go over the components of successful potty training.
All right, thank you, Angelina. I feel like some of what I'm going to say is going to be repeated from what Angelina said because she's so amazing at potty training and went over little bits and pieces already. But some key components for successful potty training include choosing your goal, so finding out where your child currently is with potty training, whether that be if the restroom is intimidating, so maybe just starting there, then walking into the restroom. If they have a hard time sitting on the potty, that might be your next goal. Or if you notice that they're starting to tell you every now and then they're sitting on the potty, maybe your next goal would be trying some underwear on your child instead of the pull-up. You can kind of base that off of where your child is at. The rewards to keep in mind, because we want to make sure we are rewarding our children for going potty, because it is so scary at first and so hard, and there's so many skills involved in potty training. So you want to make sure that you're choosing the right reward for your child. Getting a good idea of what your child likes, of course. I'll go over a little bit later, but also keeping in mind that the reward that you're using for potty training is not something that your child's getting often at home. The less often they're getting it, the more exciting that reward is. So if you are not a sugary person at home, maybe potty training, a little mini chocolate chip might be the way to go. But yes, we'll go over choosing the right rewards. Making sure you guys have the appropriate materials, so whether that be underwear, pull-ups, whether that be a potty seat, those different things. The consistency, again, something Angelina had mentioned, but is so important. Routine and consistency are so important for our children under the age of 5 specifically. And so just making sure that if you're going to get started doing this and you're wanting to take them every hour and a half, so is grandma and grandpa if they're watching them. So is dad. Everyone's on the same page, whether that be their daycare provider or someone of that sort too, that there's consistency throughout this process, because it is a process and it will take a little while. It's not a quick process, unfortunately. And then time. So Angelina had mentioned that 5 minutes off, 10 minutes off, 5 minutes on, 10 minutes off style. I could not ask my grandmother or my mom to help do that with my child, so I might take a day off of work or use a holiday to begin potty training my child to make sure that I have the time to implement that schedule with them. So just making sure that you guys have the time to do so. So going back toward talking about the goal for your child, you want to consider, again, where they're at with things. I know that flushing, it sounds like such a silly part of toileting, right? But that's kind of where you can start with rewarding them. If they can just flush the toilet when they're done, or if they're just sitting right now, you're wanting to reward them sitting, even if it's for a little bit. Being okay in the restroom, especially a public restroom, having them, again, there's so many skills involved, but having them tolerate a public restroom is a huge one as well. So maybe that's one of the goals that you're setting for your child. Just to keep in mind too, to make sure that we're only focusing on one goal at a time. Again, so many different skills involved, so make sure we're not putting too much on our child to enter a restroom, sit on the potty, and void, and wipe, and pull up their pants, and all that good stuff all at one time. We want to focus on the main goal and start easy for them. So different rewards. So here's a beautiful visual actually that we tend to use often, is the first then visual, to kind of give them a quick idea of, okay, first potty and then that reward. Whether that reward's in person or whether there's a picture of it, you want to make sure that they know it's coming after they use the potty. Whether that be, again, first sit on the potty and then that mini chocolate chip, or first void in the potty and then you get the reward. But first then visuals like this are very helpful for children. Again, we're picking them specific to your child, specific to their experience. We want to make sure it's something that's immediate. So if we're potty training, we don't want to say, okay, if we go potty, then we can go to Target and go get your favorite toy. It needs to be something immediate right then and there that you can provide for them. And then it's easy to give and easy to take away as well. Here are some ideas of rewards, whether those be small items, the treats, social time, or other reward ideas. Things like iPad time. Again, though, if screen time is something that's common in your home, I wouldn't use iPad as a reward if they often get it in the home. But maybe it's a fun phone call to grandma and grandpa to tell them what, so-and-so just did, or stickers are a good one. They're fast and easy to give right away. Or filling up a small treasure box with little items too. Again, we want something easy and quick, and you have to base it off of your child's interests. Oh, I almost forgot the most important one, the potty party. Lots of praise, lots of excitement, lots of reinforcement when it happens. So you mentioned it earlier, but the potty party is something that is usually very successful. You get them excited about it, and they'll be eating out of your hands sooner or later. Provide all the stickers, all the fun stuff during that time. So setup and materials. So you want to make sure that your experience, or I'm sorry, their experience and yours, is a positive experience. So these are things like fun transitions to the restroom. So, oh, it's potty time. Do you want to get a piggyback ride to the potty or race to the potty? So they're excited to go. There's also things like putting up pictures in the potty of their favorite things. So I had a friend one time who loved Bluey, so we would put up pictures of Bluey in the restroom. Next thing you know, he loved going there, and next thing you know, we were starting to use it more often. And providing those choices, like I mentioned, with the piggyback ride or this, or when we sit on the potty, do you want me to sing Twinkle Twinkle or Itsy Bitsy Spider? So giving them those choices, that way they feel like they have some control in the restroom, and also just making it fun for them. So other supports, Angelina had mentioned social stories earlier. You can tailor them to your child's experiences. So yes, you can find them online or you can create them in your own way. If you do tailor them towards your child's experiences, you can use their name in the social story. You can use whatever they're earning in the social story. You can take a picture of that potty that you guys are using at home and include it in that social story. Books about using the toilet. So I remember one of my friends, she loved a Daniel Tiger potty song. I don't know if you guys have heard it, but it got her going and she was excited to use the potty. So you can use books or songs or videos and things like that to enhance their experience. And then allowing children to accompany parents to the restroom. Yes, that's where they learn most, right, is observing their people in their environment, looking up to mom and dad. And if that's the case too, then you can even tailor like the way that you are providing the reward to you when you're using the restroom. So you can say, oh, look, mommy went potty, mommy gets a Skittle. So you're modeling exactly what that looks like for them. And there's so many different materials that you can use, including a variety of potty seats. There's so many that you can put over the toilet, or there's some little toilet seats that you can just use on their own, which I was a fan of when I was potty training my child, because she had a really hard time transitioning from play, and our playroom area was so far away from the bathroom, and I felt like we weren't making it in time. And so the little potty seat where you can kind of take it anywhere with you was in the hallway, and as silly as it sounds, it was sanitary. We were cleaning it up, it was fine. But it helped her, and then we slowly transitioned that toilet seat further away from the playroom and closer to our original restroom. So we utilized that potty seat in that way. Also, big toilets are scary for a lot of kids, so parents might just prefer to not start off with the big toilet, regardless if there's a seat over it. Again, it's pretty intimidating for our little ones. And just to make note too, so if the child has low muscle tone, please consult with a physical therapist or an occupational therapist, and they can recommend you the best adaptive equipment to use during potty training. I know that the placement of the seat, the foot placements that are involved in some of the toilet seats help with when it comes to muscle tone, as it brings their legs a little bit up and makes it easier for them to urinate or void. So please consult with a physical therapist or occupational therapist if you see anything like that, or if you know your child has low muscle tone. Something to keep in mind is the type of clothing that you're using during potty training. So you want to steer away from the zippers and the snaps. Definitely look more towards dressing your child with elastic or drawstring waistbands, loose fitting pants or shorts, and as silly as it sounds, even their shoes, because when they're standing upright, urine tends to go down their little legs and into their little shoes, and socks and all that good stuff. So making sure that you have shoes that are easily removable would be super helpful when starting this process. All right, potty training on the go. So again, the consistency is so important. So if you are potty training your child and there's a trip coming up, or you have to go to a relative's house, you just want to make sure that everything you're using when potty training in your home or at school or wherever that might be, or daycare, wherever that might be, that you have it with you and you can implement that consistently throughout a different environment and setting. There's also a bunch of different seats that you can utilize when traveling, whether that be on the road and having to use a public restroom, just to make it easier for your child, because sensory issues are a thing. And again, big toilets, loud flushing, especially the automatic ones, those are all so scary. So one of the best advice I'd ever given, because personally my daughter was very terrified of the automatic flushing of the toilet, was putting a piece of toilet paper over the sensor of it, or you can bring a sticky note and cover that sensor as well. It helped her utilize the public restroom a little bit more, so I hope that if your child's dealing with that, that would be helpful for you guys as well. Bringing hand sanitizer to avoid the automatic faucets as well. Everything's automatic now, but I don't think the person who invented that kept our children in mind, because it is scary for the little ones. You can also bring some noise-canceling headphones. The bathrooms tend to echo. I don't know if it's the tile or what it is in the restroom, but everything is so much louder in a restroom. So bringing those noise-canceling headphones and seat covers for the cold toilets would help make that environment easier for your child to utilize. And don't forget to stay positive and be patient. Like I mentioned in the beginning, it is a long process, so go ahead and celebrate those small milestones and keep in mind of them. Consistency and routine will help establish great habits in the future, and every child is different. So every child will go at their own pace. Every child will benefit from different materials being used and the way you do things. So just keep that in mind and try and be as flexible as possible. And here's a QR code if you want to utilize any of the resources available. And the presentation was created by Valerie and presented by myself and Angelina. All right.
Okay, so I just wanted to speak briefly about immunizations for TK. So what you need to know, so California law requires that all students entering TK have documented immunizations of valid exemptions before admission. So vaccinations are important to protect your students against vaccine-preventable diseases. So specifically, the vaccine requirements are as follows. So diphtheria, or we call it DTaP, so diphtheria, tetanus, and pertussis. Students should have 5 doses. For polio, you might see it on your vaccine record as IPV, 4 doses. Hepatitis B, they need 3 doses. And measles, mumps, rubella, MMR, that is 2 doses, as well as the varicella, which is a chickenpox vaccine. They need 2 doses for those. This is as you come into TK. So now, as of this year, we do have some special considerations for some of our younger TKers that are being registered, because we do have students registering when they're 3 years old. Your child, in order to enter TK as of 25-26 school year, should be turning 4 by September 1st. So our first day of school here in Sangre Unified is going to be Wednesday, August 20th. So there is going to be a window of time for students who, are born, have a birthday between the 20th and the 1st, where they will be starting school as 3-year-olds. The reason I mention this is because the immunization schedule is different for 3-year-olds than 4-year-olds. So what I mentioned earlier, that's the full vaccination schedule for a 4-year-old attending TK. If your child is still 3 years old when you're registering them right now in the spring, or if they're going to be 3 years old when they start the school year, we are going to be admitting them conditionally. So basically, we're going to be following the pre-K requirements for our preschool requirements for registration since they're 3 years old, because they can't have that doctors won't give them that last dose of the number 5 for the DTaP, the number 3 for the polio, and their second MMR and varicella, they won't be able to get any of those until they're 4 years old. So the main thing is just to keep in mind that we are going to be admitting them conditionally, which basically means we are admitting them on the condition that as soon as they turn 4 years old, per the state mandate, we need to make sure that they are fully vaccinated for TK requirements as when they turn 4 years old. So that means that if your child has a birthday and turns 4 before August 20th, which is the first day of school for us, then you should make an appointment or make sure to make plans to get them fully vaccinated before they start school, because we will be kind of monitoring that and making sure that students who are already 4 years old by August 20th have all of their full immunizations in order for them to start school that first day. If your child is one of those that's going to turn 4 after the first day of school, then we will be in contact and let you know. But the expectation is that when they do turn 4, so if they turn 4, let's say August 30th, then we would expect that they would get fully vaccinated at that time. And you do want to make sure and do that just to try to avoid any issues with us having to exclude any students from school, that kind of thing. Exemptions to the preschool immunizations is for TK, students don't need the Haemophilus influenza type B or Hib. They need that for preschool, but they don't need it for TK. So I think we kind of got ahead of myself on this slide. It was basically what we've already kind of talked about, that basically, 3-year-olds admitted conditionally, and parents need to provide evidence of them being fully vaccinated when they turn 4. And the accepted records are doctor's records, a California immunization registry, which is called CARE, which the doctors should be inputting the vaccinations when you get them in whichever clinic. They should be inputting them into that registry, so you can get a printout of that, and that we can accept as well. Or the immunization we used to call a blue card, which is basically, or the yellow immunization records. Any of those we can accept. Waivers and exceptions. So we get a lot of questions about that. So waivers and exemptions. So as of, I believe, January of 2021, the law in California changed. And so if in the past there could be like religious belief waivers or different things like that. But as of that date in California, the only way to get a waiver is to go through what I mentioned before, the CARE, California Immunization Registry, and go through their medical exemption portal, basically. And so this would be something that your doctor, your child's pediatrician would be putting in that entry into the CareMe portal, and it has to be basically approved by the state. So if they approve the exemption, then you would bring us that CareMe exemption, and we would be able to accept that. Or in some cases, you would let us know, and then we're able to log in and see that exemption. But either way, the only way that we can do any waivers for immunizations is through this portal, through this system. Resources and support here, just basically you can look up the California Department of Public Health, CDPH Shots for School. They have a lot of really great resources and information there. There is a link as well to, there's immunization handbooks, and I know it was mentioned earlier in the presentation, but our Sanger Unified Family Resource Center is a wonderful resource. The people there are great and work really hard to help our families with whatever they need, and so we have had situations where parents have been able to go there and get help with this, because sometimes if people are just moving to the area and they're having issues with Medi-Cal or with different insurance carriers and trying to find that, they are great about helping you kind of navigate through that. And there's also, the school nurse can also help you with finding out different clinics. Here in the district, we will have a immunization clinic through the Fresno County Office of the Superintendent. They have a mobile health clinic that will be coming out and doing immunizations before the beginning of the school year. It will be there at Washington Academic, and we will be kind of sending out information about that. But there is lots of different resources, whether it's your local pharmacy or or some of these immunization clinics where you can have the opportunity to get your child fully immunized. So, all right, and that's it. Thank you.